welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. Have a seat. Well, school has drastically changed for all of us in a lot of different ways. But if you go to school here at SES, you are continuing to get a very excellent education and a spiritual education. And that's incredible, especially in the times that we are in. And so we want to say a huge thank you to all of the office staff and the administrative staff for all that they are doing in their pursuit and creativity to continue to give that kind of education to so many students. So we want to say thank you to all of the people in the office staff. Thank you over to the ladies in the EEC, Priscilla Shin, Sandy Meza, right out here, Dawn Holloman, moving in the back here, Debbie Toth, Mary Cummings, moving back, there's some administrative offices, Jay Cummings right here, Mark McVeigh, Jim Toth moving in the back, Karen Bustamante, and then finally this way, Travis Hughes. Thank you so much, everyone, for all that you are doing. Here we are in Psalms chapter 56, verses 1 through verse 7. And before we see who God is, I want to give you the context of the situation. Now, context is so crucial. So 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 10 through 15 give us the context of what is going on. So here, David was on the run for his life from Saul. And David was so desperate, he was hiding amongst the Philistines where he was their greatest enemy. That's how desperate he was. And we see that David was in the state of oppression. If you look right here in verse 1, he uses words like this, tramples me, for man tramples me. An attacker oppresses me. They trample on me. They attack me proudly. It goes on in verse 5. They injure my cause. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They stir up strife. They lurk. They watch my steps. They've waited for my life. And so David is in this state of oppression. And not just that, it is constant. Look here in verse 1. All day long. Verse 2. All day long. Verse 5, all day long. So David is in the state of oppression continuously. And what do you think his natural response to all of this is? Right here in verse 3 is fear. David is in the state of fear. So this is what's going on. So now, as always, we ask the question, who is God? In verse 1, as we have seen time and time again, we see here, well, who is God? He is Elohim. And this word, again, is the Hebrew word for God, and it conveys that he is the one and only true God. But more than that, he is the God at the very beginning. From the very first sentence of the Bible, in the beginning, Elohim. And it conveys the idea of God's sovereignty over all, because he has created all things. And so he has control over all things, and he has power over all things. And this is who God is. So how do you trust this God? How do you trust Elohim? And as we have seen over and over and over again, it starts with prayer. Verse 1, be gracious to me. And you might be saying, okay, I get it, Pastor Dave, got to trust God with prayer. But I think there's a reason why God has given us a pattern of prayer and how it starts and how we trust in God with this pattern of prayer, because we are so good at trusting ourselves. As I've often said, prayer is the confession of our dependence upon God. And how often does our prayer life reveal how good we are at trusting ourselves? And we see right here, we trust God, and it starts with prayer. But not just that. He gives us some specifics here. When do we trust God through prayer? Well, right here in verse 3, when we are afraid. You can trust God in moments of fear, just like David. Now, you may not be fearing for your life, but there's a lot of other fears we have in our lives. And moments like we are now, in these moments, they often reveal fears from our idols being taken away. And so how do we trust Elohim? We pray. And when can we trust Elohim? When we are afraid or in moments of fear. But not just that. How do we trust God in moments of fear? Well, right underneath, he says, I put my trust in you. And what David is saying here is you take your fear and you put it aside. Now, trusting in God doesn't mean there is an absence of fear. But what he is saying here, I put my trust in you,
I'm going to take this fear and I'm going to put it aside and I'm going to replace it with purposeful, deciding confidence in who God is. He is Elohim, and I'm going to trust you, God. Martin Luther says this: faith or trust is a living and unshakable confidence, a belief in the grace of God so assured that a man would die 1,000 deaths for its sake. This is what you replace fear with, this unshakable confidence in God. So we can trust God in moments of fear by taking fear and replacing it with confidence in Elohim. But it always goes back and it starts with prayer. Prayer gets us from point A, from where we are, how we're feeling, what's going on in our hearts and our minds. That's point A, and prayer gets us to point B, to where we can say, I put my trust in you. This is partly why prayer is so crucial in trusting God, because it takes us from point A and it gets us to point B. So my challenge to you is to pray. Trust Elohim, and it starts with prayer. When things are good, the calm and the peaceful moments in life, to the everyday situations, to moments of great fear like David, and you trust God, and it starts with prayer.
We trust you. We trust you. Your ways are higher than our own. Oh, we trust you. Jesus, we trust you. Your ways are higher than our own. This we know.
Well, thanks for coming in. It was so good to see you today. You know, in fact, we are going to take away all tardies for the rest of the year and just get rid of them. We'll see you guys tomorrow.